All right, and first up, our first speaker of the night is going to be Kimberly. She is a first-year law student, so whenever you're ready, please take it away.
Thank you so much. It's nice to see everybody at the event tonight. As mentioned, my name is Kimberly. I grew up in Montreal, but I've been in Ottawa for a few years now. I did my undergrad at the University of Ottawa, and I'm a first-year student at the University of Ottawa again, studying law. So a lot of what I say tonight might be more related to sort of my path into law. I'm sure some of the other speakers will have more experience in their actual degree, but I started mine about 3 months ago. So I have a little bit less to say, although I'm happy to answer any specific questions if you have any. My degree was in computer engineering with a minor in engineering management. And I was really involved with sort of student societies, community involvement, volunteering during my undergrad. And I sort of knew that I wanted to take my engineering degree a little bit farther along than what is typically done in that path. And I knew I wanted to involve more people and think about society. I considered a master's in public policy. I considered a lot of different avenues, but eventually landed on law school because of some of the work I did prior to law school. In Ottawa, it's really common to work for the federal government as a student. It's really a program that's available anywhere in Canada, but because we have so many of our government buildings here, it just ends up being really common. And I had the opportunity to do sort of policy work at the intersection of technology, economics, law. I researched privacy and security considerations for technology, and that's really what cemented my decision to go to law school. And that being said, I still took a little bit of time between my undergrad and law school to make sure that that was a decision I was comfortable with and I wanted to continue along that. And I've had the opportunity to still do some work for the federal government in law school, and I've now work in sort of high net worth compliance. I work on a data governance strategy, so really pulling from my technology background and bring it into sort of the legal sphere of considerations that we need to have. In terms of my application to law school, I honestly am very open about the fact that I didn't have great grades in my undergrad. And that really stressed me out during the application process. And prior to that, I honestly almost self-selected myself out of applying to law school because I just didn't think I would get in. But a lot of schools, I think all the schools in Ontario at least have an access category that you can apply to. So if you face sort of systemic barriers to your education during your undergrad or to achieving a path that would allow you to go to law school, you can often apply through a different category and explain that in an essay. And I think it's really important to bring that up because that would have reassured me when I was in my undergrad and looking into applying. There are also different categories that different schools have. They sort of manage their own, so it's different really per law school. There are some for Indigenous students. There are some for students who face sort of a one-time event that caused either like a bad semester, bad grades, different circumstances. And during that time, I think it's really important to mention sort of, yes, that these things happen and these were barriers that I faced, but also it's an opportunity to say, this is what I learned. Law school is a lot about advocacy. You will be advocating for your clients. And I really use that as an opportunity to say, hey, I faced these issues with having a disability and accessing accommodations in my undergrad, but I'm a really good advocate because of it. And I also took the opportunity for myself to explain that, I was a queer woman with a disability in engineering, and there was a lot of sort of stereotyping that I faced and a lot of, misogyny. And I really took the chance to explain that and explained how that shaped my perspective and shaped how I wanted to approach law school. In terms of the law school academics, I sort of have three different pieces of advice, and perhaps some of the later speakers will correct me or have a different opinion. But I think if you're in law school, you're there for a reason. The law school selected you, they want you to be there. And I think it's been super important to me to really trust myself. The first semester, the first year is really an adjustment. Law is not like many programs you would take in your undergrad. And so it can be really difficult to adjust to new ways of writing, new ways of studying, new ways of approaching school in general. And I think it's really important to trust yourself and trust that you got there for a reason. I would also say I've chosen my social circles wisely. And I've only met really nice and wonderful people in law school. But one of the really cool things is that we all come from different backgrounds. Some of my closest friends did their undergrads in media studies. Some of them were flight attendants for 10 years before coming to law school. Some of them were paralegals for years and years and years. And the people that I choose to study with and interact with at school may not be the people that I choose to go out with at night or go have dinner during the weekend with. And I think that's been a super important realization that I've had. And the last thing, this was advice given to me really early on. Legal writing is not fluffy. And that seems like a really funny piece of advice to give this early on when you're sort of considering law school. But the really interesting thing is that legal writing is really about getting to the point and like informing your reader about a lot about different cases, how to apply them. And I found that to be a really interesting transition. In terms of law school extracurriculars, I thought I was involved in my undergrad, but it did not prepare me for how many opportunities there are in law school. And I'm sure other people will speak about this as well. The first month, they tell you about so many different opportunities. And I remember sitting there and thinking that it's not possible to do them all. And so it's really important from the beginning, I found, to pick, which activities do I want to do? Like, what do I want my legal, my academic legal career to look like? What do I want to do in the next 3 years? And it can be really tempting to try to do it all. And I would say that that's definitely not a good idea. Choose extracurriculars inside and outside of the law school that are sustainable, that you'll enjoy, and that don't necessarily further your legal career, but maybe just bring you like a little bit of joy and happiness. In terms of myself, some of the stuff I've been involved with, and these are not all commitments that I have for hours every single week, or else it would get very overwhelming. But I'm part of the Law Student Society of Ontario. The University of Ottawa has a criminal courthouse mentorship program where you can be mentored by a judge, a defense attorney, crown attorney, and really learn about criminal law and what that field looks like. I do legal note taking for Capital Rainbow Refuge. They do refugee applications for queer couples or individuals wanting to come to Canada. There's a common law student society. There's a few boards that I'm also on sort of outside of law school and more in like my engineering career. So there's a lot of opportunities to do a lot of different things. And for me, it's been a really good opportunity to sort of test the waters. I think the biggest question I've been asked in starting law school is like, oh, what kind of law are you going to do? And I think in the very first semester, I personally don't know. I didn't come with a specific type of law in mind. And there's a lot of opportunities to just test it out. Like, okay, I'm sitting in and note taking for refugee applications. Does immigration law interest me? I didn't think that criminal law would interest me, but now I'm doing this mentorship program offered by the faculty. And I think it's a really interesting career path to take on. So I would say the community involvement can really give you an idea of what you want to do in a professional setting. In terms of law school employment, which is sort of the last thing I'll touch on before handing it off to somebody else, there's a lot of different opportunities. Again, you can do research, you can do part-time work. I've seen a few different firms hire for part-time students during the year. And then there's summer employment. Summer employment, I will leave to other people to speak a little bit more about. But for myself, I do a little bit of research with professors at the Faculty of Law at the University of Ottawa. And it's a really cool opportunity. They're usually really supportive with wanting students to learn outside of the classroom. I've worked on technology facilitated violence in the context of criminal law, which is not an area I knew a lot about. To me, it sounded just kind of like a mouthful of words that I didn't understand. I also get to work on artificial intelligence in the global context. And these professors are often, in my experience, really great with just mentoring and saying, okay, this is how I want you to present research. And it gives you a lot of concrete skills and way to apply what you're learning in school. And that is it for me.
Great. Thank you so much, Kimberly. That was really amazing. With that, we're going to hand it off to our second year law student, Liam, whenever you're ready.
Hello, can you guys hear me? All good. I'll assume there's no issues. Yeah, it's great to be here tonight. Happy to speak about my experience in law school. And yeah, this is great. I've never done anything like this before, so bear with me, please. So I guess I'd start with a short bio about myself. So I'm currently a 2L student in my second year at the University of Toronto. I did my undergrad at Guelph. I studied criminal justice and public policy, and did a minor in business. As for my interests right now, I'm interested in corporate law and business law and exploring that field more. I went into my undergrad actually thinking about law school as an end goal. It's kind of why I chose to pursue criminal justice and public policy. Um, so I can speak about, maybe starting out undergrad and pursuing law school in the long run, and start with like how I approached undergrad. That might be helpful for people. So I guess my advice for undergrad is, focus on your grades. It's a big component of your law school applications. I think extracurriculars are really important too. And that's something that I certainly did not get involved a lot with in my undergrad. I focused, a lot on my academics. Um, I would say when it comes to law school admissions, that's definitely not something you should be even thinking about until you sort of get to your like third or fourth year of undergrad. And in the meantime, just focus on school and having fun and having a great time. Um, I think undergrad is definitely not meant to be just sort of like, in my position, I kind of saw it as, a means to getting to law school, and that's kind of how I approached it. And I think that is not how you should approach undergrad. I think, you should totally take advantage of the great opportunities in undergrad and have fun, really enjoy it. Um, I think grades are important, but they're definitely not the be all and end all. And if I could go back, I wish I got more involved with extracurriculars in undergrad personally. Um, as for work experience in undergrad, um, basically no one I know in law school now had any experience whatsoever surrounding the law going into law school. My advice for work in the summer is do something that you enjoy. Um, when it comes to doing like your personal statements for applying to law school and job interviews, I think you can sell any experience and make it use your transferable skills from any experience. You definitely do not need to be thinking about getting legal experience in your undergrad. Um, I worked for the city of Mississauga in the Parks Department and I loved it. Um, so I would say that is maybe a misconception that some people have that, you need to look for, like working in a law firm or something like that. I think that is definitely not the case. Um, as for, my experience with the LSAT, again, I think that's something that, you shouldn't be thinking about until, maybe towards the end of your third year. And that's if you're thinking about law school right after undergrad. Um, I took the LSAT in between my third and fourth year of undergrad. And my advice for the LSAT is, start prepping early. Um, a lot of people take months to study. The good thing about the LSAT is that, it is possible to improve your score. And so it is a learnable test. So my advice is start early and acquire resources. Um, for example, I took a course with the Princeton Review to study for the LSAT. I highly recommend that program. It was fantastic. I would say with the LSAT, you know, take a test without even studying and see how you do. I remember when I did that, I did very poorly, and I knew I had my work cut out for me, but that was kind of why you do that sort of thing. Um, so that's my advice on the LSAT is maybe don't even think about that till you're done, your third year of law school or third year of undergrad, sorry. Um, yeah, as for my experience at law school so far, um, maybe it might be helpful for me to talk about the biggest differences that I see between undergrad and law school. The first one is just the sheer amount of work, at least in the first year that I've noticed. There's so many readings and and lots of extracurricular opportunities to get involved with. I think my advice is to really find strategies that work for you, and to be efficient with your time and your time management. You know, I'm not going to lie, there were some long hours in 1L, but you know, presumably, if you can get through the LSAT and get through undergrad, you know, you work hard and you know you're capable of doing that. Um, you know, I got involved with a lot of extracurricular activities in my first year. I worked for the Asper Center, which is a constitutional rights group at the Faculty of Law. So I did a lot of research for them. I worked with Laws. It's a mentorship program that's also run through the Faculty of Law. So I got to go do tutoring at high schools. And I got to conduct a couple of workshops in high schools, which was a lot of fun. So to Kimberly's point, I think there are more extracurricular opportunities available to you in law school. In fact, there's like so many that you want to get involved with, but you possibly can't do them all, which is really exciting, but you can also overload yourself, which brings me to my next point, which is my other piece of advice is to, um, you know, be strategic with your time and just really be careful not to take on too much outside of your courses, because those can be difficult and time consuming in and of themselves. Now that I'm in my second year, the biggest difference I see is that the time is a lot more manageable. The courses are a lot more manageable, and I have experience writing exams in law school. So I feel like the time commitment is maybe a little bit less than first year, and it's a little bit less daunting in that regard. Um, as for law school on the whole, I find that the social environment is much different. Um, you know, you're taking classes, at least in your first year, with like the same core group of people, and you get to really know them, which is really cool and something that doesn't really happen in undergraduate, in at least in my undergrad experience. Um, and then I guess the other thing too that I found different about law school is just the wealth of study resources that are available to you. You know, law school exams are pretty daunting in your first year, but there's so many resources available to students. Like they make available past exams. Upper year students are very willing to, you know, share their summaries of the courses to help you get through exams. So I think, you know, while law school can be very challenging, there are also lots of resources to help you when you get there. So that would be my advice on law school. And I'll pass it on to the next person.
Great, thank you so much, Liam. That was awesome. Next is our third year law student, Cynthia, although I think she might be having some technical difficulties because I don't see her in our participants list right now. So I think we're going to move on to our recent graduate, Katrin. So whenever you're ready, please take it away.
Hi, yeah, thank you for having me tonight, and thank you for Liam and Kimberly on sort of touching on how law school is going so far. So my name's Katrin, and I just graduated from the University of Ottawa Law School in the spring. And I'm currently doing the law practice program through Ryerson University. Well, now it's Metro Toronto University, but what was Ryerson University. And it's an articling equivalent, and I will get more into that in a little bit. But I guess to back it up a little, so I also graduated from the University of Guelph for my undergrad. I did international development and political science, and I loved it, but graduated kind of not really knowing what the next step was, because I mean, you put international development on your resume and everyone's like, what is that? So I didn't even graduate undergrad thinking that law school was my next step. It was always something that I kind of sort of considered in the back of my mind, but I was daunted by the LSAT and I didn't really know. So I worked for 2 years in Toronto after graduating from Guelph, and I worked at a yoga studio, so not, law related or even international development related at all. But it was awesome, and it sort of gave me the time I needed to figure out what my next steps were. So about 6 months into my first year of that 2 years, I decided I did want to do law because it sort of fit into the various areas that I knew I was interested in. So I signed up to write the LSAT, and sort of like Liam mentioned, I gave myself quite a bit of time to study. I think I wrote it in June and started studying in like February-ish, because I was also working full time. And I also did the Princeton Review prep course and really, really enjoyed it. So I would also recommend doing some of the prep courses if you're considering writing the LSAT. And I didn't really stress myself out about it because I had time. So I tried to do, an hour or two every day. But if I didn't get to it, then I knew I had sort of the course. I think mine was Wednesday nights for 3 hours or something. And that was sort of a good intensive. And the courses also give you like practice exams, which I found really helpful. And you can sort of track your progress as you go. So I wrote the LSAT in June, did my application sort of that November for then the following year. So it is a long process. It's definitely something you have to think about in advance. But if you are sort of early undergrad, I wouldn't worry about it at all at this point yet. So I started law school at Ottawa. I had never been to Ottawa before I decided to go there for law school. And I had a few options. I applied to a bunch, had a few options to choose from, and I knew I didn't want to do corporate law. I knew I was more interested in sort of, I guess, continuing on from my undergrad, sort of more the politics, policy, human rights, social justice side of law, which is one of the reasons I chose Ottawa, obviously, because of their sort of government connections. And I had most of my first year in person before COVID hit. And it was great, as Liam and Kimberly have mentioned, there's so many things you can do, and it's really busy with courses, and it's definitely an adjustment from, for me, it was an adjustment from having been working for 2 years, but an adjustment in terms of what you're used to from undergrad and things as well. But I also met some amazing people and had some great profs, and it was really great. So then COVID hit like just before exams, my first year, my final exams for my first year in March. And that was when, the world was falling apart and nobody really knew what was happening. So none of us really got good 1L summer positions that year because firms weren't hiring and nobody was leaving their houses, and it was chaos. So I actually spent my first summer after 1L painting boathouses. So it was like not at all related to law at all. So do whatever you want, because first summer after 1L, like honestly, have fun, travel, obviously probably make money, but you don't have to worry about getting something law related. And then my entire second year was online, and it sucked. And I know everyone here can relate, depending on what stage you were at when COVID hit, but having to do it all online was not fun. But you get through it because you don't really have many other options. And there was the additional challenge of figuring out how to get involved in extracurriculars and things when, again, it was all virtual. I was president of the Ottawa Association of Women in the Law for 2 years, and it was awesome. And it was definitely the best part of my law school experience, sort of meeting people that way and coming up with ways to get students involved in things. So definitely do seek out those extracurriculars because there will be something you're interested in. So it's a fun thing to add to the whole experience. And then my 2L summer, so applications usually sort of are due in January, February-ish for that coming summer. And I did participate in the full formal recruitment process, which if you're still an undergrad, you probably haven't even heard of, and that's okay. You'll figure it out. But I didn't even get interviews out of that process. So then Ottawa has a few options for applying for their fellowship programs they have. So you can apply and tell them what you're going to do for the summer. And then if you get it, they might give you a little bit of funding. So that's what I did. And I ended up working in a member of Parliament's office for the summer, which was amazing. It was really, really close to what I was interested in, and I really enjoyed it. But again, not necessarily your typical sort of law school, law firm kind of summer job, but it was, I was the only one on his team who had legal experience. I didn't even have a degree at that point, but legal experience. So I was involved in policies and parliamentary committee meetings, and it was really, really interesting. And then Ottawa actually didn't really go back in person last year either. So most of my third year was also online. I got one class per semester that was in person, but otherwise we were completely online as well. And again, that was challenging, and there are definitely parts of law school that are challenging, but totally worth it. And hopefully moving forward, we won't have to worry about online school anymore, fingers crossed. So hopefully it's not something you guys have to worry about. But yeah, so then articling is something that you get into right after law school. And it's sort of the final, well, no, not the final, one of the next steps in your process to actually being licensed. And similar to 2L summer stuff, articling applications usually begin, well, actually in the fall of your third year. And I went through that process as well, applied to a million places, got some interviews, still never got a position. So this program I'm currently in, the law practice program, or the LPP, is run through Metro Toronto University, and it's recognized by the Law Society as sort of meeting the experiential requirement that articling does as well. And you don't have to apply to this LPP program. If you graduate from a law school in Ontario, you're sort of automatically in. And there's also a lot of people who went to law school outside of Canada who are in this program with me as part of their sort of NCA certification process. So it's a really, really interesting mix of people. It's sort of a similar timeline to the school year. So I started in like right at the end of August, early September kind of thing. This first 4 months through till the new year is online. You're working in a virtual law firm. So it's essentially you've got I guess the profs is the easiest way to describe them, pretend to be your managing partners, and they send you different work, and you're working with different groups of people who are also in the program to file memos and do research and all sorts of things that you would be doing for an actual, if you were articling for a firm. And then starting in January, it's a work placement sort of program for 4 months. So I just got hired by the Ontario Bar Association. So I'll be essentially articling with them starting in January. But that's only for the 4 months. And then if that all goes well, then I will be called to the bar in June, and I will be fully licensed and ready to go. So I think I have a pretty untraditional law school sort of path experience, I guess. And honestly, I feel like there might not be a lot of support available for that in schools, even in law school. They help you set up interviews with all the big firms and even some of the bigger organizations like Eco-Justice and things. But then if you don't get there, then you're kind of on your own. So anyway, bottom line, if anyone has any questions about, sort of less traditional experiences, absolutely reach out or ask at the end of this session when we have the chance. The other thing I was going to say is, even if, regardless of what your sort of previous work experience is, include it on your resume. So even if you're coming into law school, or even if you're coming into 1L or 2L summer applications without any legal experience, include your retail or your fast food waitressing, whatever your work experience is, absolutely include it on your resume, because you've learned and gained so many skills from that are applicable to a legal career. And if you don't have it on your resume, then it's just going to look like you haven't worked before. And chances are that's going to impact your chances. So absolutely. And don't feel like you need to sort of hide it or anything. Like, that's really valid work experience. And anyone who's served or worked retail knows that it's hard. And, you get really good at dealing with people and thinking on your feet and working in a fast-paced environment. There's so many ways that you can spin that and apply it to other applications. The other thing I was going to say is, in terms of the LSAT, don't be too daunted by it. Like, if you know that law school is what you want to do, don't worry too much about the LSAT. You can write it multiple times if you need to. A really good friend of mine wrote it 3 times, I think. And just because, she is smart and had good grades in law school, or sorry, in undergrad, but test taking just wasn't her strength. So she wrote it 3 times, and actually just like last week got hired for a 2L summer position at Fasken downtown Toronto. So she's making it with sort of the big leagues now, and really struggled with the LSAT. So don't let that impact your overall decision. You sort of figure it out. And I was fortunate, I only ended up needing to write it once, but if you have to write it more than once, but you know that law school is really your goal, then write it more than once. And that's not going to impact your overall sort of law school experience or career. Yeah, so happy to answer any questions about that, or I don't know whether the organizers will be sharing our emails or anything at the end of this, but if anyone thinks of any questions or wants us to reach out, I'm absolutely happy to chat about it.
Great, thank you so much. That was very informative. Before we actually jump into question and answer period, I just want to give another huge thank you to all of our speakers for being here. I'm still not seeing our 3L speaker in the participants list, so I'm assuming she will not be joining us tonight, unfortunately. But a huge thank you to the rest of you. We really appreciate you taking time out of your schedules to share your expertise and advice with us. It's very much appreciated. So yeah, so we will jump into the question and answer period. And just before I do that, I will stop the recording.